Welcome to Product Unfiltered. In this episode, we are excited to host Yogesh Paliwal, Director of Product at Cisco Wireless. With over 17 years at Cisco, Yogesh has witnessed the evolution of the networking industry firsthand. Join us as we delve into his journey from a software developer to a product leader, explore insights from the networking landscape, and discover what has kept him dedicated to Cisco throughout these years. Thank you so much, Yogesh, for being a part of Product Unfiltered. We are glad to have you here.
Thank you, Utkarsh. Thanks for having me and accommodating this discussion at the early morning hours. Appreciate it.
No, it's a pleasure having you here, Yogesh. And before we dive into the core meat part of our discussions, that is product management, we would first like to learn about your journey from being a software developer to a product to the director of product at Cisco.
All right. So yeah, you talked about me being here at 17 years. It's a long time. You would think, how can somebody stick around 17 years when every span of a PM or an employee in an IT org these days is year and a half at max. It's different things. While I may have been with one organization for long, I've done what I wanted to do in different roles. And if I got bored of one other role, I chose what I wanted to do in the second one. So I started as a curious engineer. After my master, so before masters, I was doing some startup, but after my masters with IIT, in computer science, I joined Cisco. I had other offers, but I like networking, so I prefer to be in Cisco. That was the intentional choices that I made. Of course, like anyone else, I started coding on one of the networking domains called routing. And at one point, I realized that while I can do this, I want to understand who uses these things and what they use it for. And I was struggling to find direct user. Like it's not easy for a B2B space engineer to go and directly correlate who will be using it and what it is for and what their outcomes are. So I quickly changed my work area to be more customer facing, which was in a way surprise for many people, because if you're from computer science in early 2000s and from IIT and not coding for long, or if coding is not your primary job, it was in a way different to imagine or difficult to imagine. But I intentionally made a pivot to say I want to do a customer facing role. So I worked with one of the biggest service providers in the world at that point of time to see how they're solving their network, what problem they're trying to solve for, and what they're trying to achieve ultimately. And that was being in Cisco role. So it was part support, part escalations, part pre-sales, while I was still titled software engineer. And I did that for good 3-4 years. By the time we went through the 2008 downturn, so that had interesting play there, both in terms of Cisco and the projects that I was working on, as well as the partners that I was working on and how they kind of took it. And at that point, I was very sure that I like to look at the bigger picture and solve problems. So I moved into a second phase called wannabe PM. Right. So I was looking at what is that I could do, because I think I like looking at the problems and solving these. So I did, there were some go-to-market team in India at that point of time. There were hardly any product teams. So I worked with them to do some go-to-market initiatives. A lot of free work for the PMs that were on the other side of the globe. In India, we had few PMs, but they're mostly doing operations work. And I did a structured education also with the institute called IPL, run by Pinkesha, very dear friend and a guide. In 2012 or 2013, it was still very early days of PM landscape in India. But I couldn't find a full-time job that said product manager in the title. There were, issues around, whether you need to be MBA or not and whatnot. So I continued to do the work that I wanted to do, but without the title. And it had many, learnings for myself on trying to get to a solution space rather than just working on a point product. Then at some point of time, in I would say I think 2015 or 16, while I was doing all of these things and my day job, at that point of time, I got called. People notice you, right? If you're doing and if you're making effort to kind of do things the way they want. I got involved with a very strategic project. Again, by very good mentors that I sort of worked with and explored in this wannabe PM phase. Uh, and I was called to do a multi-year, hundreds of engineer worth of 0 to 1 product slash solution, from concept, like just define your landscape, like, yes, we want to do this for next generation of this, but how will you build a roadmap? How we want to go to that? What will be your execution looking like? How will you phase it out? What's your budget is going to be like? Everything, right? Mm-hmm. And we got to a decent start, shape in terms of readiness and early field trials with customer. And it so happened that during that phase, to get it to market, I had to come to US. So I shifted to US with that project. We launched it. It is the standard for stability and feature innovation for wireless domain in Cisco today. And at that, while we took it to market, I had a good conversations with the PMs at that point of time here in US. And at some point in time, I was asked to say, okay, it's good you be a PM officially, and hence my PM journey started. Mm-hmm. Since then, I've been PM, a PM leader, and now a director of products for Cisco Wireless for last year. I would say about almost a year now, leading multi-billion-dollar product portfolio. So it's been a rewarding journey. I mean, it's been with one org, but has been super exciting, and I wouldn't want to do it any different than what I did in my last 17 years.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting to hear how someone started from engineering and to navigate the path towards product, had to enter the go-to-market and then come to the product space. So it's really, really great to hear that how you have navigated your career through that. But Yogesh, since you have started your career in the networking industry and you have seen the industry evolve over time, we saw Wi-Fi coming in, then a few other technologies and networks coming in, then we saw the emergence of cloud in this whole industry. So we want to hear your perspective of how you have seen the industry evolve over time, and where do you see it now, and how does the future looks like to you?
All right, that's a really good question. So I would put it in different ways, because this is a very complex space involving different type of stakeholders doing different things, right? But if you look at from a user point of view, the problem that we are trying to solve in the late 90s and early 2000s was reliable connectivity with wired itself. Most of the services are coming from SPs, or what we call internet providers, right? AT&T, think BT, whatnot. That time thing was, can I get a good connection with where I can browse, right? Like 2.0, Web 2.0. That's the primary requirement, and of course connect and do whatever, my emails and anything else that I want to do. There were meetings, but there were hardly any. I would say mostly on analog phones. There was hardly any IP-based meetings that are happening. So mostly text, I would say. And then Wi-Fi was in early stages. Yes, it was seen as something breakthrough that will give you freedom from your desk, right? You can move, and it was an early Wi-Fi started in late 90s as a standard, right? By the way, but it really got a growth when it met its best friend called iPhone, because iPhone had a different evolution path, but that provided a true growth trajectory together when users can be productive on mobile and needed something that allows them to connect, right? So mobility came into the picture. Then, Amazon retail team sort of found a way to productize their solution that they had found for their data center to the world that we call AWS now. So the cloud happened. Mobile and cloud means applications that were in data center moved to the cloud. That put a different requirement on the networking industry in general. Networks moved to the cloud to some extent. Applications moved to the cloud. Cloud meant different requirements on how do you develop products, how you deliver things. So that's one part. The second part of it is the kind of use cases that you're seeing were earlier, like I said, if I connect, it will be good enough. To the user expectation of saying, I want to be mobile and still wanted to be connected, right? That had evolution in Wi-Fi space, that had evolution in, the LTE space, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, as we know that. So that's one part, like just human interactions. Then we got connectivity into business critical things. Earlier, we were just connecting it for human needs, and if it drops, it's not a problem. But if the connection drops, where there is a healthcare, some operations surgery going on, and some manufacturing production is going on, that has a real implications both on the business as well as the human life, right? So the outcomes became more and more critical. From a business model point of view, right, as a PM, if I think it was a box by box delivery model earlier. Like we used to deliver routers, switches, and all of that, and stitching them together and making a solution out of it was left to the end user. Then we came to a space of saying, okay, I think all of these needs to be put together because that's the problem that customers are facing. So why don't we some sort of NMS, as it's called, network management solutions? And you give them as a box to customer. So now he had another box to manage all these boxes. Then the cloud came in, and then, okay, it's okay. Then there is an initial hesitancy period for customers to say, I'm using it on-prem and I like it. Do I go to cloud? Do I need to go to cloud? Why should I go to cloud? All those questions. My applications are the cloud, but why does my infra need to go to cloud? Right? And then we as a PM sort of started looking at what benefits can we give you, the end user with cloud, which could be, hey, we can take some of the workload that you are doing right now, which is your lifecycle management, firmware management, some sort of vulnerabilities. We can offload a lot of work from you. And then comes the period of saying the networks are becoming bigger and bigger, right? And IT staff is getting smaller and smaller. So how then you are managing some of the basic things for me, but then can you help me more because you have the data? And that's where the whole data science, AI, ML explosion happened. That means now you can look at this whole big data, and we used to call it big data. Now we call AI, ML, everything, right? And of course, now we are getting into generative AI and conversational AI. But that kind of provided the opportunity as well as the problem that was looking for a solution. So now we are looking at how do we make those people more efficient and and inform them proactively rather than reactively of that there is a problem, anticipated, right? So predictive AI comes into the picture. Not everybody is so then there's a different expectation of saying, does my IT staff need to be as techy as they used to be 10 years back? Like, do I need CCIs? Or can you make the interaction point simpler so that I don't have to hire the technical expertise I may or may not be able to hire? Or, I have 10,000 branches, I will not have IT expertise there. So the user expectations on how networking and networking industry has evolved has gone. Of course, I didn't talk about the cloud networking. So most of the networks, because the apps are in the cloud, the data centers are literally in the cloud. Of course, access and humans has to remain out of the cloud, thankfully, which means the networks are hybrid. You have to have the policies and the SLAs that you have on the on-prem side of the house has to seamlessly translate to the cloud networks, which is a different thing now, because it's not that you're just using one cloud, you may be using more than one cloud. Of course, I mean, if you read recent surveys, the companies that say we are not using cloud typically are using 2 or 3 clouds.
Yeah.
And if they are using clouds, some of them are even using like 25 clouds, right? So it's an extreme. So which means now if you are a networking provider, you have to deal with increasing user expectations, increasing or changing landscape of the problem space that you're solving for, changing business models. Like like I said, we started with capex based models. Then as we go to the cloud, it became a subscription software license business. Then as things evolve, people are saying, but why should I pay for the capacity that I may not be using it for? Like I don't pay in the cloud. So why can't I go to pay as you go model? Right. So now we are seeing NAS based models coming out, utility kind of thing. So it's evolving space, and as technology changes, the problem landscape changes. It's the As a PM, I would say this: it's how do you marry or find the most recent, most important problems for your customer that are relevant today and solve them in timely manner. I know it's a long-winded answer for the question, but it is important to understand how things have evolved in the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah, and that's actually really interesting. Yogesh, thank you so much for breaking down the complete evolution from all these years. Like, I'm sure me and Rahul have been a part of this evolution, but we were not first-hand experiencing it at work. So that was really helpful. But we talked about the past 15 years of evolution in this industry. But what do you think is the next big bet in the networking industry coming in? And specifically, I'm interested in learning how can AI transform this industry. One key point which you mentioned during your discussion was really interesting. 10 years back, it was like you create a solution and the team using that solution has to be tech savvy. Now with AI coming in, you guys are innovating that aspect of it to make it more simpler. So just curious what things look 10 years from now.
All right. So let's look at it this way. What people are doing today, right? And what is the trajectory of the technology that is available to us, right? Of course, where we will be 10 years from now, we can only speculate and think of what may happen, right? So where we were 10 years back, I'll start from that. 10 years back, if you told somebody that you would have a system that you can talk in your natural conversation language and will give you answer about anything that you can think of, right? People will laugh at you, right? So in terms of solution, where will we go 10 years from now is limited by the imaginations that we have, right? It will be the function of how best we make use of the technology, how the technology evolves to, and how the product leaders of next 10 years take it to. Of course, in terms of user expectations, as humans, we always want to be bigger, better, and faster, right? Which means if I had to spend CCIs to be able to bring up my network 5 years back, or even now to some extent, depending on where you are in your journey, now I expect that my networking providers are making it easier for me, and I just try to do the bare minimum, right? As technologies evolve, my expectation of networking is it's going to be transparent to the user. Does not matter what technology you use. You may use Wi-Fi, you may use LTE, you may use wired, right? Context as a user, Utkarsh will be the one who's using it from here on wired port, on wireless port, from US, from India, from anywhere else he's traveling. He would expect his context of his networking policies, but more importantly, right, that may not be visible, the application policies. As an end user, I would want the kind of permissions that I had when I'm in the US, I should carry with me if I'm in India. Think like let's talk about an example. When we went into COVID, all of us were working for office, right?
Mhm.
And suddenly we had to go to homes. Now the IT departments, again, each individual IT department would be in their own journey, but most of them were solving remote work using VPNs,
Yeah.
right? So you have to VPN into your system to be able to connect. But once you VPN, you realize that you're using lot many applications that are in the cloud. So you're hairpinning your traffic from your home to your office headquarters or wherever your data center is back to your application, which introduced lag. All of us were doing remote, video applications. That was super inefficient, right? That led to a different kind of innovations in a very short period of time that allows us to seamlessly work today, right?
Mhm.
By saying this example, what I want to call out is technology alone is not sufficient. You have to have the problem space, the pain point for it to get adopted and get solved for, right? What you see conversational AI today, I mean, there are innovators that have done some sort of conversational, NLP based engines 5 years, 10 years before today, like in 2010s and whatnot, right? Why conversational AI is off topic conversation today is because there is a PM who found a way to scale out that solution for general public consumption so that other PMs and users of the world can use it in a meaningful way and include in their products. And that is why it's on the hype cycle, right? Because now all of us see a possibility of using AI
Mhm.
in our products. So where we will be 10 years from now will depend on what kind of problem space that we are in and how we make best use of the technology that we have at that point of time. And I'm pretty sure we'll have generative AI mainstream in next 5 years, but then things will be beyond that.
Yeah. No, that's true, Yogesh, that having technology is one aspect of evolution, but having the right context and the way how you're going to put it out as a solution to the problem is very important as a product manager too. But let's also talk a bit more about the B2B and B2C space because you have been in the B2B space throughout. But at parallel, as a product leader, you also have seen how B2C space is also evolving and how products are built. So if you can give our listeners a good comparison of how things works in B2B versus B2C as a product manager, because one of the challenge which I see in B2B space is the sales cycle or the product development cycles are very long. And maybe a case where we start building a product with X context, and while we are building and while the sales cycles are going on, the requirements might change. And then how do you as a product manager or a product leader cater to those needs? It would be interesting to hear your thoughts.
That's a really good question. So think of it this way. I think by no means I'm trying to simplify, but B2C space, specifically the applications are our short development cycle. Use of cloud allows us to do many things that we can validate faster with our users. We could do, even in the initial stages, we could do some sort of mock-ups even before putting a development team and see how the customers will react. You can put certain functionality out there, then do A to B testing and kind of adjust your iteration cycles is much faster, right? When you go to a B2B space, again, there are a lot of things that you can follow from your B2C experiences. Anything that we do cloud in terms of user experience, in terms of, um, what would work for the audience or the consumer, that certainly is something that B2B can learn from B2C. Um, Having said that, in B2B world, the complexities come from one, the long, to your point, infrastructure specifically in B2B world, it has a long refresh cycle or long lead cycle in terms of deployments. Um, it also has long investments or bigger investments to be able to make to that stage. Like if you are doing a B2B infra, you have to be able to spend millions and millions of dollars upfront, right? Which means you as a PM need to be really sure of the investment, because the cost that you will have for a failed experiment will be much higher, right? Again, this will be different for different PMs. If there's a PM who's doing a point feature on a certain product which is already there, he may have a different feedback cycle and whatnot. But if you're doing a brand new 0 to 1 product on B2B, that puts a different requirement on the product leaders or their product sense, their ability to understand where the problem space is. And that's why it's important to talk about problem space and not so much about features. Because features and the need of features and the way people consume will change it. But if the problem space is well defined, you understand that the pain point is long term and not short term, and that will be sustainable need. That means you invest in the right architecture. Of course, you do anything that you do in the B2C space in terms of validating customer needs and whatnot, but you invest in the right architecture. You build the right B2B business strategies, the business model around it. Again, there's no B2B product that gets sold as a point product. It has to come with a lot of integrations and infrastructure along with that. So you have to think of how your product will be built, used, consumed, and paid for, and validate that upfront with a lot of your stakeholders. So there is upfront work that has to happen for this long-term investment. Having said that, you have to also build agility into the system where you can seek feedback on point features and every stage of this long-term investment as well. The feedback loop mechanism is important and super critical for you to pivot to the right thing. But once you've made certain things, the sunk cost is too high. And that is why you don't see many players in B2B spaces coming every day, right? Having said that, B2B space evolves at its own pace, and it is not what it was, let's say 5 years back or 10 years back. So the innovation, I would say B2C is pushing into B2B these days because end users are becoming more savvy and more demanding. The buyers and the user persona, like let's say users are influencing buyers. Earlier, mostly buyers will make choices, and then users were not. I wouldn't say not important, but I would say they are not the primary decision makers, right? So the space has evolved there, and that's why the PM skills have to evolve with that.
Let's also talk a bit about Cisco, Yogesh, because you have been with Cisco for such a long time. Talk to us about the culture there, because we have seen the company grown through a lot of acquisitions from acquisitions, which means that the company needs to shift the culture according to the company they're acquiring and how they are growing. So what is your take on this as a product manager or a leader? How have you seen the company grow? What's the company culture, and how will you differentiate it from the product culture of the company?
So, and I would just add one point to it. As fellow Cisconian, I'm really curious to know that what has kept you dedicated for Cisco for all these 17 years. Just a small addition to what.
Good one. And let me maybe answer the second question first. I think one thing that I like about Cisco is the flexibility for you to do what you want in terms of if you like. Cisco is a big organization with many cultures. And like I said, for me, I think what is important is if I find something interesting, I would like to have freedom to be able to do that, irrespective of is that part of my charter or not. And one good thing about Cisco is people are welcoming. In general, also humans won't mind if somebody else does their work. But in Cisco, people are really open to, okay, if you want to learn about it, here are the resources. If you want to do something with me, like you have to find those mentors and whatnot. But Cisco has allowed me to do many experiments within my career in Cisco. So I started with my introduction, and I've done many things in different organizations and different capacities, and that's what is appealing about it. Sorry, what is the first part of the question?
A bit about the culture of Cisco and
Right.
how do you differentiate the company and product culture?
So two parts to this. Cisco, like I said, is many cultures inside it. We have different groups, and within groups we have different teams. Cisco also has acquired many companies over a period of time, so they bring up their subculture with it. So I would say there is a broad Cisco culture in general, which can be defined. But I would say this, like I was answering previously, in Cisco, people are open to ideas, open to let you do the things that you want to do as long as it is relevant and can make logical sense. That's the broader culture of Cisco. Within the product teams, every product team, depending on what they are doing, because also remember Cisco has uh, embedded products in networking world. Cisco has on-prem, Cisco has cloud presence, Cisco has applications, collab, security. So depending on where they are in the portfolio, the product cultures are different based on their agility to be able to go out to customers and the risk profiles that they may have. Um, in terms of product culture, I would say this. I've been largely in the networking space with some small stint in the security. Uh, the culture has evolved a lot along with the problem and the solution space. So earlier when I joined, I think everything used to be waterfall, and it's not necessarily bad because Cisco's infrastructure runs the most critical connectivity pieces on this planet, right? So you have to be really sure before putting something out on the network there. Anything that we do send today, even with, I can say with proud, it goes to some Cisco infrastructure, even if you do a single click on your app today. Um, Having said that, as product and solution landscape evolved, I myself remembering running agile pilots back in early 2000s. So some of the companies that are some of the groups that could do a lot of SaaS based stuff move to more agile delivery cycles, more UX design and whatnot. Some of the embedded products have to go through that long-term planning cycle. So I would say right now we are at a stage where we are delivering products on the cloud within my group, where we do a lot of user research upfront, because we deliver from SaaS platform, and it is possible for us to do a lot of A to B testing. At the same time, the SaaS application at the backend interfaces with some infrastructure element, and those infrastructure elements have their own cadence of planning, a build up cycle of a year, 18 months sometimes now, right? And we have, I won't call it a standard industry framework like agile or safe, but we have found a good way where our firmware slash embedded software product runs on a different cadence with a regular touch point with our more agile cloud application interface with the users. And we are able to deliver value to the customers faster in our agile delivery cycle as they face it, and kind of still continue the critical infrastructure stable. With data science coming into the products, and AI ML, this has become more interesting, as in we get new set of stakeholders in data scientists and whatnot, and that has been a revelation for me in general, because I come from that infrastructure background, and last 4 or 5 years I spent a lot of time working with the cloud and data science teams and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yogesh, it would be also interesting to since you come with so much of experience, it would be good for you to answer this question that someone who is early in the career, how should that person make a choice on where should he or she start? Should it be passion? Should it be money? Should it be the right technology out there? How do one decide where to start?
I would say this is the most important question, right? I mean, money is not everything, but it's important, right? So, depending on where you are in your journey, I would say, specifically in the early career folks, if I leave the money part aside because each individual has their own circumstances, their own life. I would say you should optimize it for learning and scope, right?
Mhm.
What I mean by that is when you get to a fixed mindset, like be sure about your vision, right? Like I want to be this, experience from. It may sound cliche, but you have to be intentional. So you say if your goal at that point of time and says in 2 years I want to be able to do this, right? So then be stubborn about that vision, and be flexible about the choices that you make, but be sure that it is aligning to your that goal. It's a different thing that 2 years from now you may realize, why did I have this goal? I could have done things differently, right? But you are making a choice that is best at that point of time. So to kind of cater to that vision of 2 years, 5 years that you have, maximize, optimize your choice early for the learning towards that vision. Now,
Mhm.
that vision could be, and I know this is about product managers, but this could be that I want to be the best engineer out there, or I want to be the best UX researcher out there, right? Or let's say, even if it is our product manager, it's still important in the sense, if you are a product manager, you have to know all your stakeholders. So you have to
Yeah.
understand how my direct end user is going to use this product, right? How my direct user is going to use this product. What are the choices that my stakeholder on the engineering side or the UX side has to make look at it. So optimize it for your learning and the scope, right? But
Mhm.
also, if you are making a choice, understand what you want out of this PM job, right? Um, and is this company in where it is in your life cycle, or is this project where it's in life cycle for the kind of learning that I'm looking for, right?
Mhm.
Let's say if you want to be looking for high growth, if you get a job in a high growth company versus, let's say, a mature company, the choices that a PM makes in those two roles are different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The learning that you have in those two roles are different, right? So you have to make your choices. Of course, it doesn't come with just saying you have to go through your own learning cycles there. Also, I think one thing that I'm very particular about is you have to be sure about, does this company's value system align with my value system, right?
Mhm.
There are different work cultures, let's say in Amazon versus somewhere else, right? Versus the startup, right? So you want to be building a long-term profitable business? Does that align with your value system versus you want to be in a high growth startup and move to another startup, let's say with something else comes in the high growth trajectory. So if whatever aligns with your value system, as long as you're intentional about it, any company is okay.
Mhm.
No, that's really insightful, Yogesh. And Yogesh, when you were mentioning about all this, one thing which definitely came to my mind, you have been the director of product at Cisco, leading such great initiatives. And I'm sure you may have worked with many early stage PMs as well. So I have two questions here. First, what are some qualities which you have seen in early stage PMs who then on become successful product leaders? And second, what are some qualities which you see while hiring PMs within your team? So would love to touch base on these two aspects.
All right, so let's start with the first one. I think the number one quality that any PMs bring into the system is the attitude to to solve the problems, attitude to learn your ecosystem, as well as empathy for your users and stakeholders.
Mhm.
Right? At the same time, it's important for that individual to have their own perspective into the domain that he's coming in. So if there's a PM coming in, he better has a perspective on what is right and what is wrong. Look, there's nothing called right or wrong in that perfect sense, but you have to have your own opinion, and you'll build over a period of time on where the space is going and how I can solve the problem in this space, because that's where the innovation comes from. Um, as far as the second question that you asked me, which is
What are some qualities which you look while you are hiring or you're interviewing any PM?
correct. So I hire for uh, okay, so that depends again what kind of hiring you are doing, right? But like I said, number one, I look for attitude. Skills
Mhm.
can be learned if you have the right attitude. The second thing, it also depends on what is the immediate need of the hiring manager, right?
Okay.
Uh, I might like your attitude, but let's say at a certain point of time, I'm looking for certain skill set because that has certain delivery or timeline, right? That's the urgency of the need.
Mhm.
So you hire based on the technical needs of that point of time, but you always look at strategic fits in terms of, will this person and his attitude and skill set work for us long term?
Mhm. That's interesting to hear, Yogesh, because I would also want you to create a hypothetical scenario tomorrow. Let's say if you have to define the whole product interview scenario, what would be your ideal approach to what type of interviews would you like to take for people who are early in the career and want to enter into the product space? Because today we see the process is very, very long and there are multiple levels to it, but we want to hear, okay, tomorrow, if you want to create a new process of hiring for early career PMs, what would that be from your perspective?
So, again, very good question, and the answer would be subjective to which way you're going. I'll start with that rider, right? I think when we hire for PMs, like I said, we talked about attitude and skill set and other things. So that's what we want to evaluate a candidate for. Now, how do you do that? That is different in different orgs and their ecosystem. Like no hiring manager uh, makes a full interview setup, right? Like he in his org, he has been given certain condition, certain structure to kind of deal with it. That's what comes from your people partners or HRs as we call them, right? So there are certain ways and it evolves. Um, Earlier I remember we used to have, and I'm talking purely from my Cisco experience and some of the startups that I've helped interview candidates for, but we were used to have many individual rounds with different stakeholders just to sort of say, okay, does this person fit with the UX person? What's the engineering? Just understand different stakeholders and different functions that he'll be working with. Right? Then we started getting into, okay, as especially in the B2B world, the user experience or some of known functional requirements becomes important, right? How do you get different perspectives so that you build the right product, just not only for the functional needs that you may have, but also the emotional and social needs of that product.
Mm-hmm.
That means you are looking for hiring from not purely from technical background, because you'll know this, right? All the guys who are coming from MBAs and especially with engineering background, they're very very clear on what they want to do in formulas and all of that, right? Logic will make sense for them, but they may not be that high on the empathy cycle, right? Like or how what is this user looking for beyond just the functionality? Like what are his constraints? So when you try to look for those things, then you kind of try to put a panel that evaluates just not only the technical
Yeah.
and the functional needs, but also the emotional aspects and the empathy aspects with the associated with product. So you hire in a different way. You have different techniques to kind of look at that.
No,
That's so
that's
true.
very true, Yogesh. And thank you so much for all those valuable words. I'm sure that in such an uncertain market, these suggestions or feedbacks would definitely help aspiring PMs or early career PMs to navigate their career path. But now, as we are heading towards the end of the podcast, we would also love to know some of the resources which you regularly follow or some of the books you read to keep yourself updated in the product space and in the technology space in general, which you would like to recommend to our listeners.
All right. So as a PM, I think I follow Shreyas just for the amount of guidance and nuances and day-to-day tips that he puts on social media out there. I've been in one of his classes also. I follow Lenny also for the very same reason. But and then I follow some of the industry leaders. Professor Mohanveer Sawant is one of those. Many, I follow Jeff Bezos as a leader. I admire him that he has gone against industry's generic wisdom that you make money. And he has gone against his, I would want to minimize margin and still build a profitable business out of it. And he made the biggest word out of the world, right? So I follow him for that and how his thinking has, influenced many things in the tech industry. Then I follow, it will be hard. I don't know how you'll find it, but I follow many other domains that are nothing to do with technology and see how you can map learnings from there. So I follow defense, for example, right?
Nice.
I followed defense and wars. All of us like war movies, but I follow how let's say, the wars that was being fought in 100 years before World War II to the what happened over the period of time and what is happening in geopolitics right now in Ukraine and Russia, and then how you went from a small arms to the bigger arms to the tanks and whatnot, and then now you realize the tank fleet may not be super successful because there is a small a drone that can come and get rid of your drone thing. So think of it and get that learning back from there into your space. How would that apply, right? We were doing, maybe you guys are in school, but we were doing mainframe based compute earlier. Then we went to a desktop based compute. Then we are centralizing based to the a cloud compute. And there will be in future for sure a use case that will go and say, go to edge computer on-prem again. And it will be different reasons. It will not be the reasons for the reasons that we have done in the past. Right? In the past, compute was not easily available. So you went to the mainframe centralized computes. Then Microsoft came and they made compute easier. So we got started there. Then we wanted to take, advantage of a common global good as well as for the, scale, price scale, cloud scale, advantages and whatnot. So we went to cloud and centralized computing again, right? Maybe tomorrow there'll be a need to say, okay, maybe it is because of AI, maybe because of privacy, maybe because for other reason, say we'll go to decentralized compute, right? So how that space evolves, how do you come to that? Go into music, anything that you like, right? And see how you can map it back to the area that you're working. Learnings are almost similar in different spaces. And when we kind of merge two areas, that's where the innovation comes.
Yeah, that's very true, Yogesh, and some really valuable insights here too. Like, not just the product space will develop you as a product leader, but there are a lot of aspects of the society which can help you build the thought process around it. But that brings us to the end of today's discussion, Yogesh. Thank you so much for sharing all those amazing insights. I'm 100% certain that all the discussions which we had will help our listeners to build a thought process around why they want to do product management and how are they going to navigate through it. So this brings us to the end of today's episode. Hope all the listeners have enjoyed our discussion and the discussion has helped learn something new. Stay tuned for more such exciting episodes. Thank you so much for tuning into Product Unfiltered.